Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, analysis of the latest developments in the Air Force's F-35 fighter program. Find out the latest in its production. Plus, we speak with an Air Force official on the status of the military's cross-service Joint Command and Control System. Where do things stand at the end of 2022? Let's find out. And female Marines with ponytails? The Corps issues new regulations for women's hairstyles. How low can you go? We've got the latest. Finally, the Army and Naval Academies are out with their uniforms for the annual clash on the football field. See what each team chose to honor with their theme. And the Air Force's Beast Week gets the worst name change ever. Find out what it's called now. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon on this episode of Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. Defense News air warfare reporter Stephen Losey recently visited the plant where Lockheed Martin is building the F-35. We spoke to him about how production is recovering from the pandemic and where it's headed.
Stephen, you recently returned from Fort Worth, Texas, where you saw the facility where the F-35 is being built. Tell us about your trip.
That's right. I went to Air Force Plant 4 in Fort Worth, Texas. It's run by Lockheed Martin, but it's owned by the government. It's where Lockheed Martin builds the vast majority of the F-35s that go into the world. We're talking F-35A, B, and Cs, all three variants, not just for the United States, but also for allies such as the UK, Australia, Israel, Norway, Belgium. It's been operating for 80 years, since 1942, when it was building bombers for the Second World War, and now it's building the most advanced fighter jet in the world.
The COVID pandemic complicated industries around the world. What did it mean for the F-35 production, and where are they now?
Lockheed Martin had to take a lot of steps to adjust to the complications presented by the COVID pandemic, which really snarled a lot of supply chains. Originally, that in 2020, when the pandemic hit, they were hoping to produce 141 F-35s. They ended up only producing 120, and they're still working to recover from that. Lockheed Martin realized early on that some of their supply networks were going to get slowed down, and there was going to be an accompanying slowdown in how much work they could do on the F-35. But they didn't want to lay workers off during that slowdown period because they were going to have them when work resumed at a full pace. So what they did was Lockheed Martin sat down with its union, hashed out an adjusted work schedule where they worked 2 weeks on and 1 week off for 4 months during the summer. That allowed them to adjust to that reduced pace, but also allowed all the employees to come back at full pace when the supply chains sorted out their problems.
And are they at full pace right now?
They are at full pace right now. Right now they're hoping to produce somewhere between 148 and 153 F-35s this year, and Lockheed Martin tells me that by 2025 they're hoping to have caught up on their schedule and caught up for the reduced F-35s that they made in 2020.
And where are they on the supply chain? Are they caught up on that respect as well?
They have, yes.
So they adjusted the pace for the workers, but I understand they also had something quite unique in terms of funding their suppliers as well.
There's a lot of small suppliers that the F-35 relies upon. And Lockheed Martin was worried that some of these small suppliers, so to speak, mom and pop suppliers, wouldn't be able to keep their lights on during the tumultuous economic days of the early pandemic. So what Lockheed Martin did, they adopted a forward funding strategy where they were paying small suppliers in advance before they delivered parts. In 2021 alone, they paid $400 million to small suppliers. And that allowed the small suppliers and businesses in the supply chain to know that there was going to be business for them down the line, and that Lockheed Martin would be buying from them when those parts came in.
I see. And in terms of cost of the overall program, has that changed from before the pandemic to now?
Yeah, for the last couple of years, in the last couple of lots of F-35 buys, the price of an individual F-35 has been declining to a little less than $78 million in the last lot. Now, Lockheed Martin and the government struck a handshake deal earlier this year for the next 3 lots of F-35s that are going to begin getting delivered next year. However, Lockheed Martin is acknowledging that the price is likely going to increase. And there's also an advancement in capabilities that are coming. The next lot of F-35 fighters is going to come with a new slate of capabilities called Technology Refresh 3 already installed. That's a series of hardware and software improvements. It's going to give the F-35 better memory, better processing power, and get it ready for the new slate of capabilities called Block 4.
You mentioned Tech Refresh 3 coming in the new lots. What kind of technology is that going to have?
Tech Refresh 3 is a series of hardware and software improvements. It's going to include give the F-35 better displays, better processing power, more memory, and it's going to make it possible for the F-35 to get a new slate of upgrades called Block 4. Lockheed Martin has referred to Tech Refresh 3 as the backbone of Block 4. Now, Block 4 is going to bring with it the capability to carry more weapons, better targeting, improved advanced electronic warfare capabilities. It's going to be make the F-35 a very capable fighter, even more so than it is today.
So let's switch gears from fighters to bombers. The Air Force is unveiling the B-21 really soon in California. What are we going to see there?
That's right. The B-21 Raider is going to be the first time the Air Force has unveiled a new bomber since 1988. That's when the B-2 Spirit bomber was rolled out. This new one is called the B-21 Raider, and it's going to be unveiled at Palmdale, California. And all year long, the Northrop Grumman, the maker of the B-21, has been putting it through a series of ground tests, doing the finishing touches on this first test aircraft, and getting it ready. Now, there's 6 B-21s being constructed in total right now, but that's going to increase in the near future, I'm sure.
And why does the Air Force need a new bomber?
The Air Force's bomber fleet is aging. Right now it has the B-52, the B-1, and the B-2. The B-1 and B-2, the B-1 is wearing out, and the B-2, there's only 20 of them. What the Air Force wants is a 2-bomber fleet of just B-52s that have been refurbished with a slate of brand new engines by Rolls-Royce, and the B-21. At least 100 of those, probably more.
So after this ceremony, there's going to be a lot of manufacturing, and there's going to be a lot of steps I would imagine that you would see. What's something that we're going to see in the near future for this bomber?
The next step for the B-21 will be the first flight. Now, Northrop Grumman's still being a little hush-hush on when that might take place, but it's expected to happen sometime in 2023, maybe a couple of months from now. Once the B-21 is ready, it's going to fly from Palmdale to Edwards Air Force Base, also in California, where this first B-21 is going to start undergoing its first actual flight tests.
All right, Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, glad to be here.
And in other news from around the military, in what can only be described as a major downgrade, the Air Force has renamed its basic training finale exercise. Known since 2006 as Beast Week, the deployment simulation will now be known as Pacer Forge. I'll say that again just so you get it. Pacer Forge. The name change is actually part of an overhaul of the entire mock deployment exercise, trimming it from 4 days to 2 and focusing it on simulating a rapid response to an urgent threat instead of a counterterrorism fight. The former version was officially the, quote, Basic Expeditionary Airman Skills Training, or BEAST module. The new one is the Primary Agile Combat Forward Operations Readiness General Exercise. So, get revved up about that. Let's hope they keep Hell Week. And in staying with the Air Force, the service is moving ahead with its program to field a new Special Operations Light Attack and Reconnaissance plane. The Air Force Special Operations Command in August chose the AT-802U Skywarden to fill the role, but now has to find a way to train pilots to fly it. That's because the airframe, made by L3Harris and Air Tractor, is a single-prop tail dragger design that the Force hasn't flown for decades. Tailwheel aircraft fly differently than other types of models in the Force, so officials are still coming up with a model for how to train new pilots. The Skywarden is part of AFSOC's Armed Overwatch Initiative, which seeks to provide close air support, precision strike, surveillance, and reconnaissance in counterterrorism missions. And that's it from around the military. When we come back, the future of the Joint All-Domain Command and Control Initiative. And later, a look at the new Marine Corps hair regulations for women. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. The future the U.S. military envisions is one that brings all elements of the armed forces under a single operational umbrella, allowing ground, air, and naval forces to share real-time information. It's known as JADC2, and a top official from the Air Force was on hand recently to talk to us about where it stands and where it's headed. Here's part of that conversation.
So I'd like to start pretty broad here. I'd like to maybe find out how you specifically define JADC2, depending on who I've asked, or it sometimes seems like what day it is. I've heard it's a concept, it's a philosophy, it's a pursuit or a method. I'd like to get your insight on that.
So JADC2 is about warfighting. It's really about combined arms. It is an age-old problem that's really approaching it in a unique manner. This began 1957. The Army did it in the Pentomic Division, and they approached it from an organizational, how can we better combine arms in order to achieve our effect? We did it in 1982 with Air-Land Battle that looked at a doctrinal approach. Then in 2010, we did it through Air-Sea Battle that looked at it from a weapons and platformed approach. And here we are, 2016, multi-domain command and control, which then evolved into joint all-domain command and control. Now is looking at it from a command and control perspective.
At the Airspace and Cyber Conference, you moderated a panel. You said ABMS has challenged each of us to think differently. Why is that, and how so?
So one of the ways in which we currently present our forces is we do it in a component model. So it means that each of the services contribute to the joint warfighting command or the joint task force commander or the combatant commander, a series of forces, and then we align them, whether it's in a land component, a maritime component, space, air, and then we look at cyber, and then we also have our special operations component. What this does is it creates a barrier in how we use those forces. So we tend to apply those forces to the priorities of that particular component. When you look at the pacing scenario that our leaders have very clearly told us to focus on, you can start to see where some of those component barriers actually reduce our fighting effectiveness. So what we're seeing now, because of the way the operational demand, what it's levying on us, and what technology is allowing us to imagine, we're seeing the creation of a capability that starts to blur those component lines.
So is there a finish line for JADC2, or is it a constant evolution? Okay,
Never.
We've had guests say the same thing.
And that's, so what we have created is we've created a very fast iteration process. Again, that's rules-based. But what we don't ever want to do is kind of the two fallacies is that at the end, we deliver JADC2 on a ramp or at the dockside, and we smash a bottle of champagne and we all declare success. The second thing is to ever look at it as a percentage of completion. If we do this right, what we're developing is a disciplined methodology that allows us to very quickly iterate, because what we've seen with the technology capabilities delivered through commercially available technologies is we are constantly reimagining ourselves in ways that before, quite frankly, we didn't.
So is it fair to say you don't think this narrative of disjointedness is accurate?
I 100% dismiss it.
Okay.
I think it's a convenient argument that's not reflective of what's really happening and what I'm seeing at all levels, but particularly at my level.
Up next, the Marine Corps recently updated its hair regulations for women, with new allowances for several types of styles. For more on the latest additions, we go to reporter Irene Lowenson.
So the Marine Corps is loosening its hair guidelines, literally. The Corps released new guidance recently that somewhat relaxes the force's strict rules governing women's hair, opening up a few new styles for female Marines. Following the lead of other branches, which have approved a range of hairstyles in recent years, Marine leaders gave female Marines leeway to wear their hair loose at a slightly greater length. They also opened up more styles for long hair and removed the expectation that women wear their hair tightly slicked back. The new guidance changes what is considered medium-length hair, effectively meaning women can get away with wearing their hair loose at slightly longer than shoulder length, as long as it doesn't obscure the rank insignia on their collar. For women with long hair, the bun is no longer the only practical option. Troops can now wear hair tucked up as far as 2 inches below the base of their collar in the back, which gives them a little more latitude in styling. Women with short hair can now wear their hair in twists, a hairstyle that is common among Black women, but previously was only available to women with medium or long hair. And finally, ponytails. In this regard, the Marines lag well behind. The Navy okayed them for women in 2018, and the rest of the branches followed by 2021. But for the Marines, you're only halfway there. According to the latest update, just a half ponytail, better known as half up, half down, is now allowed. And that's just for women with medium-length hair, so a little shorter than mine. If you're unfamiliar with that hairstyle, it looks like this. So what I do is I brush up the top half of my hair into a ponytail, although 1 or 2 braids are also allowed by Marine Corps regulations. And then the bottom half of your hair just falls naturally. So there you go. The days of the wire-tight, slicked-back bun for female Marines may be gone, but the days of sporty ponytails aren't here yet either. For Marine Corps Times, I'm Irene Lowenson.
Thanks, Irene. When we come back, our personal finance expert gives tips on when to apply for a personal loan. Stay tuned. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack talks about the Swiss Army knife of financial tools, the personal loan.
The nice thing about a personal loan is it's up to you how you use it. Think of it as the Swiss Army knife in your financial toolbox. But any money expert will tell you you've got to know when and how to use it. Unlike a mortgage or an auto loan, your personal loan isn't earmarked for a specific purchase, so you can use it for something like a home remodel or to cover unexpected expenses. Another way people use personal loans is for debt consolidation. This can really be helpful in simplifying your finances, consolidating multiple credit card balances into one monthly payment. It saves money and maybe even your credit score. You really shouldn't use a personal loan for everyday spending. Use your budgeting skills and discretionary income for that. The same goes for vacations. A personal loan should help you with large or unexpected purchases or improving your living situation. Most banks and credit unions make it easy to apply for and get personal loans through digital banking. Check with yours to see what options are available, and remember to use your best judgment and your personal loan wisely.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, set yourself a waypoint for Army, Navy, Air Force, and MarineCorpsTimes.com and DefenseNews.com. And to be the first one in the office with the latest headlines, sign up for our early bird brief to get stories delivered to your inbox each weekday. And it's even in audio. Check out the podcast version out now. When we come back, a look at life as a Black Hawk pilot. Welcome back. Being a helicopter pilot takes a particular combination of poise, grit, and capability. In this video from the NATO channel, we learn about an American Black Hawk pilot with U.S. presence in Kosovo. Take a look.
It's almost a weightlessness to you just flying this incredible machine. Nothing else matters except you flying. To be a helicopter pilot, you need to possess determination, resilience, and to be a hard worker. The Black Hawk is an incredible machine. The maneuverability, the power that machine possesses, and just the functions that it can perform. Aeromedical evacuation missions, air assault movements, humanitarian missions, troop transport. It is multifaceted and is used for numerous things. We are part of NATO's Kosovo Force, also known as KFOR. Our mission here is to provide aviation support for troop movement, medevac missions, Bambi buckets in case fires do break out. We're here for numerous roles and we're ready to support that. Just gonna go on the maintenance pad, okay? Awesome, thank you. Hey, is the gust lock out? Yes. Brakes off? Brakes off. All right. One of my favorite quotes is by Igor Sikorsky, and it's, "If you're in trouble, an airplane can drop you flowers, but a helicopter can land and save your life." When you help someone that is in trouble and you're able to get them to a safe environment, it is extremely gratifying. All your training pays off in that moment, and that's why you do what you do, is to be able to help people.
And lastly, it's football season, so that means new Service Academy uniforms. Ahead of the annual Army-Navy contest, each team unveiled their custom designs recently. First to drop was the Naval Academy, which this year chose a space theme, paying homage to NASA and the midshipmen's astronaut alums. On one side of the helmet is an image of Academy graduate Bruce McCandless floating in space, while the other features the NASA logo. The uniforms themselves are designed to mimic NASA's spacewalk suits. The midshipmen's cleats, for instance, will be white in a nod to moon boots. Their helmets feature the phrase, "From the sea to the stars." West Point's Black Knights, for their part, chose to honor the soldiers of the 1st Armored Division in World War II. This year marks the 80th anniversary of Operation Torch, the Allied invasion of North Africa and the first 80s entry into the war. The Black Knights uniforms are green with spatters of sand to represent beach landings and desert fighting, along with various nods to the 1st Armored Division, known as Old Ironsides.
On November 8, 1942, the Allies commenced Operation Torch with the largest amphibious assault in history up to that point in time, with landings near the cities of Casablanca, Oran, and Algiers, and forced the capitulation of French Vichy forces within days. After gaining these critical footholds, Allied forces quickly initiated operations into Tunisia. Soldiers of the 1st Armored Division would enter the crucible of combat over the next 6 months in numerous battles against Axis forces. The Iron Soldiers of the Old Ironsides Division would employ crucial lessons learned to repulse the Axis operations at El Ghatar, enabling Allied forces to drive Axis forces from North Africa.
We have victory. A bright gleam has caught the helmets of our soldiers and warmed and cheered all our hearts. This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end. But it is perhaps the end of the beginning.
The two teams will face off on December 10th. And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.